Hello, people, and thank you for joining me and my friends on the Game Files podcast. My name is Matthew, and I will be hosting discussions on all things dice throwing, button mashing, page turning, and screen viewing, from the past, present, and future of those things that occupy our spare time. And today, we have two special guests. We have my good friend, Mad Marty.
Hello.
And then my other great friend, Radis.
Hello, everybody.
Today, we're basically going to have a conversation about tabletop RPGs, things that we've, how we got introduced to it, some of our best experiences with it, and we're going to lead into some other, fun things as well. So I'll just go ahead and lead off just real quick. So my first real experience with RPGs was actually with Mad Marty there. He was on a lot of drugs from a surgery, of course, and he basically took some Crayolas with a notepad and drew a bunch of random characters that were very similar to villains and heroes from comic books. Slightly different, not the exact same guys. But we basically sat down one day. I believe it was at my house or your house? Do you remember?
That was your house.
That was my house, yeah. And basically we started off as, hey, you're a bounty hunter and you're going to hunt these guys down. And it went for 30 years after that. But basically, it's basically, we call that Gen 1 as far as our groups go with that game. But that was my first experience. And again, we still play it off and on to this day, like 30 years later. So it's pretty awesome. So, Marty, what do you think? What do you got?
Well, as far as your first experience, I'll kind of talk about that in a second. But my first experience with tabletop RPG was a homebrewed Dungeons and Dragons game made through my brother and one of the neighborhood kids. So back in those days, it was all six-sided dice, and they actually created a quest. And they actually had an actual map drawn out, and they had the folder, the blocker folder set up so you couldn't see what was going on. And that's actually my true story. I must have been 8 years old at the time, maybe. We were playing in my parents' garage back in my childhood home, and that's how I got started with tabletop, which eventually moved to the first beginner's book of Dungeons and Dragons. The game that you referred to was some years later, but that was kind of the beginning of my path.
So what about you, Radis?
Well, mine was actually the game probably however many years after your first one, when we were at Jefferson. First started really hanging out with you guys, and then moving in across the street from Jeff. That's when I started playing with him, and then probably like a month after that, really jumped into the Star Wars, the original Weston Games D6 version. I loved it. How old were we? 15, 16 at the time, so I really didn't know a whole lot about it. Growing up as a son of a pastor and at that time a deacon, D&D was kind of a four-letter word in our house, but they let me get into Star Wars because that's Star Wars, sci-fi, fantasy,
dark side nonetheless.
Yeah, well, they love the movies just as much as I do, so I grew up on Star Wars, so I was able to finagle my way into tabletop that way. So yeah, it's a little bit later in life than you guys, but being the older son, the oldest of the siblings, I didn't really have a brother or a sister who would bring it into it. My sister's 4 years younger than me. She did try Star Wars. When I got into it, she played like 2 times, and then she went up to her own thing.
That's pretty funny. It's the whole, you said the whole thing, son of a pastor, and it's like, yeah, the whole satanic panic from back in the day.
Yep.
Everybody was
back
terrified.
in the day, 6th and 7th grade, where they're like, having meetings in the school gym and be like, what AC/DC stands for? It's the Antichrist, devil children. You can't let your kids listen to that heavy metal. And then of course there was the truly horrific stuff that happened with the D&D players, several suicides and a couple of people dying. But once you get into that crowd and you start playing with people, you understand that it's just like anything else. Some people just don't have the mental ability to get in those kind of games. And that can be anything. They can even just playing poker. Poker can cause really, really bad things. Is poker a bad game? No. But if you're not equipped to deal with it, you probably shouldn't be playing it. And with a game that really relies heavily on imagination and opening yourself up and really just kind of going, life is what it is, but here's a fantasy, here's a movie that I can live, and it's my character, and I can do whatever I want, and being dragged into it. So I understand that.
Ray just makes a real good point too. You could when you think about hobbies and activities of young people today, a lot of them all go into the full first-person shooters these days. It's all console gaming. It's not even PC a whole lot in this day and age. But parents today might actually applaud the old school D&D of the late '80s, early '90s, because it did require a strong degree of imagination. And
and mathematics skills and communication skills and social skills of some sort.
Yeah, and really, it was I would say all of us were somewhat of an outcast. I mean, we're all good now. We have great friends with people, and all that stuff's in the past. But as far as like kind of being the outsiders a lot of the time, that was a way to get in with a group of people that were all, kind of going through the same things as far as that goes.
Yeah.
And
right.
And it's something that for me personally, like that helped me get through a lot of tough times. Like as much as we joke about it, today, the whole, the friendships that I built from there, which obviously they're going today since I'm talking to you guys, helped me get through those rough patches for me, because I had kind of, we were talking about mental health issues. I mean, I'm not afraid to say that sometimes I suffer from depression. And, one of the ways that I was able to get through that was hanging out with you guys, playing these games, kind of detaching from reality for a short period of time, and then coming back to it and just having that kind of break from the thought processes that I had. So it's pretty awesome altogether. And to go with what you were saying, Marty, it's one of those things that would be applauded, today. Maybe not, people will still be like, that's nerdy and all that stuff. But, would you rather your kid sit down around a table, roll some dice, have an imagination, do those things? Or would you rather him sit in front of a TV and play Fortnite for 12 hours a day or more?
Right.
Which, hey, if that's what you do, that's what you do. But just realistically, for young kids especially, I mean, that's definitely not productive at all. It's just, it is what it is.
Not to knock the current generation or anything like that.
No.
Just what it is. But ironically, you kind of mentioned like RPGs and tabletops being the activity of the outcast growing up. It was kind of ironic because in my early college years, I was running games for sophomores and juniors in high school.
Yeah.
And I was having more preppy or jock style kids playing. They just ate it right up.
Oh, absolutely.
Because it is it's a blank canvas that they can paint their own reality, and it's appealing. I'm sorry, Radis, you're going to say something?
No, I was just going to say, I think a lot of that is a stigma from the mid 80s to the mid 90s definitely changed. And you have a lot of kids, and the people you're talking about are more of a, they may have been preppy, but they have a very artistic mentality, personality, because I know who you're talking about.
Yeah.
So I think that, when you go from, 1976 when Gary Gygax created D&D to today, the stigma walking into a gaming shop now, and you walk in there, and last time I was in the fancy shop here in St. Louis, I think there was more women in that shop than there were guys. When we were younger, you walk into Clark's or you walk into TSY, you might be the only three dudes in there. And that's because you're the only three dudes in there besides two guys working. Now
Right.
I go to fancy shop, and if it's a Tuesday or release day, there's 15, 20 people, and that shop is maybe 400 square feet.
Yeah.
And like I said, it's half women, half men. Sometimes it's more women, and they're not just picking up comics; they're picking up board games, they're picking up D&D, they're picking up Pathfinder. So I think the stigma has kind of gone away for that late teen to 20s, and even in the early 30s. Because technically that's still a generation younger than us. But I still see that the 10 to 16-year-olds are still sitting in front of their TVs playing video games. So.
Yeah, definitely. And so, if my wife listens to this, that's fine. And I'm okay with that. But like you're talking about the female aspect of it, it's one of those things like for me personally growing up, that was one of the things that was potentially sad for me was I'm like, man, I'm a nerd. Girls aren't going to like me. I'm going to die alone. And then, you fall into that group. And I mean, our group, our group from high school it's not 50-50, but it's, I don't know, 60-40, something like that.
Yeah. No, our group is.
Yeah. And as far as male to female ratio, and it's like, we're all still friends with them. They, it was just, I don't know. It was just a way for us all to get together and have fun. And, honestly, you connected in ways. And I mean, even my wife played back in the day. So it is what it is.
It is worthy to note, though, that our generation evolved with the gaming as well. Even though, it started out as Dungeons and Dragons, by high school, which was roughly 8-9 years later, everything turned into like World of Darkness, the whole goth aspect. The Crow was really big back then, and
best movie ever.
White Wolf, Vampire, Werewolf, Mage. That it really appealed to that whole gothic subculture, and gaming itself kind of evolved from more dice-based rule books to flat dialogue and action. So,
right. Well, and it also got out of that fantasy genre because no matter how much is ever accepted, the fantasy genre is still kind of it's out there. A lot of people do play it, but if you sit down, it's like, hey, I got a game, and you're just sitting going, game imagination for adults, and we're gonna go and pretend that we're elves, dwarves, and kill dragons. Some people are like, okay, that's cool. But if you go, hey, you can also, or we can play this other game where it's same thing, dice imagination, but you get to be an FBI spy in New York uncovering whatever. Or, or you're a high school jock who all of a sudden wakes up and finds out he's a werewolf. In a modern setting, something that they don't have to rely as much on imagination to really get them into the RPG quicker. Because they go, oh, I'm a high school student. I went to high school. I'm not a werewolf. But when you tell me that you're standing on the 50-yard line in the varsity football practice field, they can picture that immediately and then get into it more. Whereas if you're standing on, the portcullis of a castle overlooking 3 red dragons flying at you, a lot of people are like, a little bit harder to imagine that. So
yeah,
I think White Wolf was great for that, just opening up and going, okay, here's a less rulesy, more modern, but still all fantasy, because werewolves and vampires and all of that may or may not exist. So I think it really opened up so where, more people go, oh, okay, so this isn't, I'm not a knight, I'm not an elf. I'm me, but now I'm me in a world where, oh crap, I got bit by a vampire, so now I'm a vampire. So I don't know, I just think that opened up a lot more and broke a lot of stigmas, and I think really did good for the tabletop industry from a player's perspective. It kind of hurt it in the business aspect, but that's a different topic for a different podcast.
Can I ask you guys a question really quick?
Sure.
All 3 of us have both have been GMs and players. Which do you prefer to do more, be a player or be a GM? And if you were to talk to the audience about what the appeal is to each, what would it be?
Well, I would say, and I mean, this is probably obvious, that everybody should start off as a player. Get your feet wet, kind of, play underneath a couple of different GMs, storytellers, dungeon masters, whatever you want to call them. I'd say though, as far as what my favorite thing to do is, man, that's actually tough, because some of my favorite moments were as a storyteller. However, I do enjoy being the hero. So, man, I don't know. 50-50. It could go either way for me. It just kind of depends on my mood. But yeah, I don't know. What about you, Radis?
It might really all depend on the group. If I've
Agreed.
got a good group, well, when I say, let me clarify this. So if I have a group of players that are, and I don't want to say good because it's a really horrible description, but you have people who are going to get into it, who will actually, understand the game and get into their character. Now, they may not be the best, their character may not be min-max or whatever that. They may just be numerically, by the game standards, completely useless. But they're going to get into it, and they're going to enjoy it, and they're going to make the rest of the group enjoy it. I don't mind GMing. I actually enjoy GMing those kind of groups. If I have a group where no one takes a lead, or if the group is of weaker gamers, I don't enjoy running those as much because my gaming style is I feed off my players. If my players aren't giving me anything to feed off of, I lose interest in running really quick because I don't feel that I'm giving them anything that they want to do. So for me, like I said, it's really on that. I enjoy both. I will do both. Right now, I'm just in a player mode, so I've been playing Pathfinder with some buddies from Arkansas, again, via the internet, and I'm enjoying playing. I had a group that I was running for a while. We had two of my players moved off to Houston, so that group's kind of dead in the water right now. I was enjoying running them. They were beginning to open up and beginning to give me some stuff to feed off of. I bought a pre-mod for 5th edition, was running through it. Only one of them out of the 5 had ever played ever before, so I was like, all right. So I knew it was going to be a little bit of an issue, but I was enjoying that. So it's feeding off the group for me. What about you, Jeff? Marty?
Well,
Steve? Joe? Whatever you want to be called? Mary Ann?
It's all good. It's all good. As far as I've always been more successful as a GM, for the most part. Although in
put you out the airlock.
Yeah, in recent years I've been more leaning towards player. But one thing that I've always enjoyed as a GM, you got yourself a group that's really enjoying themselves, and this was particularly true with the homebrewed games. If I threw in a character, if like an NPC made an appearance that generated an immediate strong emotional reaction, it's like all of a sudden this guy shows up and the players are all like, kill him, It's it's a very good sign that, or if the players lose and they get emotionally upset about it, to losing to a specific enemy of theirs, you can create rivalries, and when you get that kind of emotional reaction, it's a real enjoyable experience for the players. The downside to being a GM, of course, is just the constant idea generation that's required. Yep. So for players out there that want to do tabletop, if you're into creating the entire storyboard and keeping the engine running, so to speak, it works more towards the GM. But if you want to kind of just follow through and just kind of exist in the world that's creative, it's better to be a player. At least that's what I'd say to start off. Yeah,
I would agree with that. And you're talking about feeding off of your players. One of my favorite things is when and this people probably disagree with me, but when I spend a bunch of time coming up with some kind of idea or direction or something that the story's going to go, and then somebody just, not in a jerk kind of way, but just throws a wrench into it and makes me have to think on my feet. And actually, like, the challenge of that is the most fun that I have doing the GM thing, because it's like, okay, everything that I had planned and thought about and whatever, hey, maybe we use it later. But right now we're going down a different path and we have to roll with it. Otherwise the game's going to fall apart. And then
because that's what I was talking about.
And then coming out of that, no, it's okay. And then coming out of it and, where everybody's like, man, like, I can't believe that happened. And it's like, man, I can't either because I didn't know what I was going to do in that case. But just being able to
that's what I was talking about, the strong players. Yeah. Yep.
I tell you what, though, Matthew, when stuff like that does happen, it makes a session that much more memorable. I've still got guys 20 years later still talking. Oh yeah, you remember that one time when we opened the door and this thing came right at you? I'm speaking in very general terms, of course.
Sure.
But the more fluid a GM and player is willing to be, the more memorable the session, the more enjoyable the session will be. So that's just a thought. So
yeah, definitely agree with that. And I'll say that the best sessions that I ever had as a player, we're actually under you, Jeff, Marty, Steve, Bob, Joe.
Marianne.
That being said, I think I only ever played maybe 2 or 3 sessions under Raidus over the years, just because that's just kind of that's just the way it kind of fell together. And I
didn't run much in Rockford.
And I don't think you've played under me at all. I don't think I've ever run. Yeah, have I ever run a campaign with you? Which one?
Yep, I played a gunslinger. I'm the only gunslinger to have survived your game.
That is correct. The only gunslinger to survive Stein. That's awesome.
For the viewership out there, that is a homebrewed game that Matthew cooked up years ago. Very good one at that too.
I was thumbing through just yesterday. I was thumbing through the pages for that. I was thinking about. I was on the fence because I was talking about running the game, which for those listening, the game is a generic name because we never named the game, so we just call it the game to this day, and we'll never name it. I mean, even if somehow we published it, or like let's say, my daughter gets a hold of the notes, 20, 30 years from now when I'm dead and decides to. Hopefully not that. I'm just saying, and she decides to put it out. I'm gonna like basically.
We're not that old.
We're not that old. But I definitely want to have like a page in there where it's like, this game will only ever be called the game. so back in the day with the homebrewed games, it was, hey, what are we playing tonight? Are we going to play the game or are we going to play Matt's game? So I didn't name that one either. It is what it is.
Actually, I have another question for you guys, and I want to get your feedback on this.
Sure.
So for the audience out there, why do tabletop?
There's a couple of good reasons. Honestly, like for the most part, you don't need any money to play it. I mean, maybe a couple of bucks to get a few dice, and then that's it. And it's some sheets of paper. Because honestly, like, all of our stuff, like when we played when we were kids, for the most part, it was just we created it ourselves. We, probably all the supplies combined for what we've done for 30 years is probably $30. As far as being able to play that game. You can spend a ton of money on base books for other games that are published, and that's cool, totally cool with that. But even for those, really only one person needs to buy anything, and then the sky's the limit. So the affordability of it is amazing, and the longevity, but also like just the friendships that you build within there. Because, back when like our parents were kids and their parents were kids and everything else, like what did they do? What did they do for fun? They ran around outside, played with sticks. I don't know, or when they were a little bit older, what did they do? They went hunting. They, did things like that. Well, the thing about it is today, like I'm not saying I'd never go hunting, but realistically, like that's just not as big of a thing anymore. It's just, this is kind of our form of the hunt, in my opinion. Like, because, when my dad, before he passed, what would he do when he went out deer hunting? He'd go with a group of his really good buddies, and they'd go and they'd have their adventure, hopefully bag a deer and, that kind of thing, and then tell stories about it. Well, what do? The exact same thing, but just, in our heads, obviously, where we go on our adventure, we do our thing, we bag the bad guy, the whatever. And then what do? We still talk about it, even to this day. Like, how many times do we bring up, Jeff's baloney dice rolls because he wants to kill somebody? It's we
even odd,
even or odd.
You failed.
He doesn't let us see it,
For the record, everybody, my Achilles heel has always been. I'm probably the worst. I'm like the opposite of the rules Nazi. So
he pretty much lets everything happen.
Yeah.
Except for when he when he wants somebody dead, they're going to die. That's just there's no escaping it. He's like, you will go down this path and you will suffer.
I swear I have calmed down in that in the last 10 years.
Yeah, I haven't. which that brings up a question. So, we've all been GMs and we're talking about that. Like, what is your favorite kill? Like, for a player, like, what was the best? whether it was intentional or that's just how the dice rolled or whatever, what was your favorite death of a character that you were part of?
Are we talking time that I've killed a player? Because I've killed lots of players.
Oh, I know. What was your favorite one, or like your most memorable or favorite, or like which one tripped your trigger the best?
Well, actually, I know this is a little bit off from what you're asking, so just kind of bear with me for a second.
Sure.
We have a mutual friend. We'll just call him Ryan. He was back in these days. He was probably 16, 17 years old, and he tried so hard to forge a good relationship with an NPC character that he saw as a mentor, and his mentor had another NPC that was his quote-unquote son. So one time I set up a trap where he unwittingly had his mentor's son get trapped in a like kind of like a clear plastic, unshatterable plastic cell, and I flooded I had the bad guys flood the cell with nerve gas, and I described in detail this guy that he was trying to protect hacking up blood because he threw him in a trap that he unwittingly he caused this character's death, and it sent Ryan into such a rage to kill the big bad that day. Like I said earlier, you got him on the hook if they react that badly to a character that they favor. It's like killing off your favorite character in a show. It's so that I'd have to say that's my favorite. I favor that even more than a player's death.
That's hilarious. That's I like that. What do you got, Radis? I know you've killed many.
I've killed enough, but like I said, I don't never really jump out. Like I said, from a GM aspect, I don't know. Just a player death, I've never really had to set anything up. Most of the time, my players end up killing themselves.
Right.
So it's not as memorable. I think the most memorable thing, and I wasn't running, I was playing, and it's a little off topic, but it's still one of those like memorable aspects of a player. When I moved to Heber, let's see, I guess I just got out of high school, we were playing White Wolf every single night. So I got off work at 11, went to buddy's house about 11:30. At 4 or 5 in the morning, we'd stop, I go home, go to bed, get up at 2, go to work, rinse and repeat. We did this for 2 straight years. And one of my buddies, his girlfriend started playing. We were playing White Wolf. She starts playing a mage. So going through the story and all that, we end up on a submarine. And my mage is a marauder, so I don't worry about who sees me do anything. Hers is not. Hers is a traditional mage. Something happens where the crew of this submarine gets doused in acid and they start to die. She plays a verbena, so she's a life mage, so she starts to heal them. So she takes one of the NPCs who have now had all their skin melted off and puts skin back on them, and she goes to roll. She succeeds on the roll, but then takes a paradox backlash. She threw the dice across the room because when it hit her, she was like, what? And for 2 months, she did not cast another spell because it hit her so hard that she completely forgot that they were just mundanes, and she did that. Like, she full-blown was, like, in every situation, like, paranoid from that point forward. And it wasn't character-driven. This was completely the player not realizing to do that. And that is probably one of the most memorable things, just seeing a player get into her character and being a fairly young player, not young age, but young as in her experience, get in that character, and then that one instance hit her to where even like seeing her outside of work or outside of the game and just hanging out, she'd be talking about it, and you could see it was almost a PTSD in her face when we started talking about the game. She's like, I just don't even know if I can play anymore. And she was right there, right back into it, but you can always tell she was like 3 rounds before she would cast anything because she's checking every corner, making sure she's not going to kill herself or have anything bad happen. So.
That's awesome.
To kind of piggyback off what you're saying, Ray, one thing that I've noticed, especially in recent years, It's just more about telling a good story and interacting with that story. One of the and I say this more so to players these days. One of the worst things they can do as a tabletopper is worry too much about self preservation.
As is apparent with our current games.
What's that?
I said, as is apparent with our current characters.
This is correct. But it's if you have a player that's too worried about screwing up or getting his character maimed or something like that, it really does slow down the story. Sometimes it's just best to, just take the shot. Make that attack or make that decision and make it quickly. Just as long as you're not trying to be dumb for the sake of being dumb. And let's face it, there are dumb players out there. We've come across many.
Yeah.
But
right.
I would say to kind of go along with the, jumping in there, like that's one of the reasons why I love to both play and GM Werewolf the Apocalypse. I mean, because that's the whole point. It's, it's hack and slash. Anybody can kind of jump into it real quick and get the mechanics down, and realizing that the predestination of every single character is death. I mean, for the most part. I mean, whenever they talk about the prophecies of what's going to come and all this and that, it's like they all die. The world ends. There's almost nothing you can do to stop it. It's just about slowing it down and trying to mitigate, basically rebirth of things for all intents and purposes.
Right.
And so to go along with that, to kind of go back to the best death or most favorite death or whatever. Now mine, I was a GM and we were having a campaign of Werewolf, and we played this campaign all the way up to, probably days before the apocalypse. And that's why I was actually sad. That game ended there and I was sad because we were right there. And I mean, there was a lot of character development and, people, I felt like the players for the most part loved them. I, created some fun little merits for Marty's character, the sleep traveling thing, because he was very inconsistent about playing. So we'd be like, oh, he fell asleep. And then 3 sessions later, oh, he's here. Oh, he sleep traveled. He was just able to get there. But
turned out later I was sick.
Right. But yeah, actually, yeah, you almost, you had the red veins, man. It's creepy.
Yeah.
So anyways, there was a character in that group, and I don't care if he listens to this or not. He probably won't, but his name was EJ. He played a Ahuran Get of Fenris. So basically the bloodthirsty warriors of bloodthirsty warriors. The thing about him, and I mean, here he was, put merits into silver tolerance and all kinds of stuff. So, I mean, essentially he was kind of like an unstoppable killing machine. That's what he was gearing his character to be. And all the rest of the characters were somewhat well balanced and complemented each other in the fights, but he was just I'm going to tear things to pieces. However, he didn't tear things to pieces. Kind of going back to what we were talking about earlier, he was always scared to do stuff. The guy had this weird silver battle axe thing and like all this crazy ability. Like he should be able to jump into every battle, and even if he does die, they're gonna know he was there. Like that's what his character was. But he always played it as, oh, I'm gonna kind of hang back and see what. No, that's not the way you play it. And then the other thing is he relied, like the only thing he ever did was, I'm gonna swing my axe. I'm gonna swing my axe. So I took the axe away. He basically was in this hunt. We went to the Amazon. He was in this hunt. And somewhere during the hunt, he basically was captured. He woke up with these tattoos around his wrists. Oh, that was the other thing. He could kind of summon it. I kind of allowed whatever they wanted to do. It's fine. But he could summon this axe. Well, he tries to summon his axe and it doesn't come out. One thing leads to another, and he meets his doppelganger. And his doppelganger has the axe. Eventually, one thing leads to another, and they fight each other. It turns out that one of them was a clone, and one of them was the original. And I made it so that the player was the clone. I let him survive it, which we worked it out. He survived the encounter, And I mean, I don't know if to be fair, I didn't know him very well when he played. He was a friend of a friend. He let his character go and go and go. And then I finally was like, this guy can't play with us anymore because he's bringing the entire campaign down. So we wiped him out. And, it is what it is. And he didn't play, he didn't play again. I wish him well. It was just, if you're going to play a game with me, try to have a well-rounded character with some kind of backstory, and don't come in with one thing and then be the complete opposite. Play your character, play it well. If there's character development over time, cool. If you're going to say I'm a warrior of warriors, play the warrior of warriors. Don't play the pansy standing in the back row with all the squishies.
Are good things, people.
What's that?
Vulnerabilities are a good thing.
Yeah. I mean, it makes it exciting. It makes it exciting. That's one of the cool things about you come through a campaign, right? And you've taken damage, and your characters come close to dying a couple of times, and this and that, and heck, maybe you didn't survive, but your death was heroic, and it caused the progression of the story. I'm okay with that too, if that's me, because that's what it's about. It's about the story, whether you're the player or not.
To be fair, a lot of the younger gamers, children to teenagers, have a harder time parting with their characters. But another tip that I would give out to would-be gamers out there, especially GMs, is allow story arcs to be concluded. Treat it like a 4-issue limited series of a comic book. Have a starting point and a couple possible outcomes. When you reach that point, close the story arc, and you know what? If you want to take out the same characters again, start another one later. But I think I've just found that it's easier to do like a 4 or 5 session storyline, close it out, and then bust out the game when you're ready to get going again, rather than to have one going indefinitely.
Yeah, that depends on your group. I do agree that 9 times out of 10 when I run a game, I usually will come up with some overarching, so something that's a 1 to 20 for D&D terms idea. So something that is happening to the world that the players will get drawn into. But as a level 1 player, you can't go, all right, now you need to wipe out this group of ancient red dragons. You're level 1, never going to happen. So if I know that's the direction you're going, then you go, okay, so now I need to get them to that point. You go, okay, so starts off and you're going to fight some goblins. You're going to, protect a farm. And it's going to be 2 or 3 sessions to get them some experience and kind of from your world perspective, start to build the name of the players. And then you go, okay, and then, wherever they want to go from there. It's like, all right, you save the farm. And they're like, well, we want to go this direction. All right, you go across that direction. Now you might get a hint at something that's going on that's bigger than you. But at that point, you still can't deal with it. So you're right, those smaller 3 to 5 session story arcs that you close up, and it kind of gives those characters a feeling of, okay, the characters are being developed. They're, they're growing. And then when you get into that, a little bit longer year mark or whatever, it's like, all right, now we can start, if the group survives that long, to get into the bigger story arcs. Some groups are good with that. Some groups aren't. Some groups just want to play their character for 4 or 5 sessions and not really have an overarching, it's like, all right, what are we killing this week? Which is, again, where you have to read your group. But yeah, I definitely agree, though, that 4 to 5 arc story when you're starting out with any game, even a seasoned group will help the group continue or the group to grow and continue to play and have fun. Because they've only got 4 sessions. And so as a GM, you can gauge, like, okay, who's really enjoying this, who isn't? All right, so the next arc, I need to shift just a little bit this way so that they'll still enjoy it. So instead of locking yourself into a 1 year.
It also makes it easier if, you have people joining or leading the group. It makes it easier to explain comings and goings of potential characters. Continuity. It makes continuity flow a lot easier by closing out those arcs. Because you can also establish the amount of time in between each story arc. You could say, you could say a couple of years. You could say a week. You could say the next day if you wanted to. You can really tailor it to your group's liking with closed out story arcs. But that's just me. I won't ever do a flat open ended campaign ever again. Indefinite. It's going to be okay. We're going to get this done within 6 sessions. And that's the way it's going to be. It could be my age talking, but that's just how I feel about it.
Because you're
Well,
old.
that's your style, and no, it's your player style, the style of players you have, and it's your gaming style. I like the open-ended ones a little bit more. My favorite session I've run was a West End game, Star Wars, that started, I'd say, the first 6 months I was in Heber, and technically that game is still not done. I think that it's been 10 or more years since I've run anything in it, but that thing went from 97 to somewhere around '05. I think it was the last time I run anyone in that session, and it was a continuing same world, same bad guys were doing their stuff. Characters kept screwing other characters over. At one point, I was running a game at a buddy's house. I was running that game, but I was running 3 different groups. They're all 3 different areas of the thing, all doing their own different thing, but still kept screwing over each other. Had 2 player deaths in that session from other players killing them.
Actually, Ray, you're bringing something up that's also kind of interesting. I want you guys' take on this. And Matthew, I apologize if you have other topics you want to cover still. But
That's fine.
one question that I do have for both of you is, how do you feel about the whole screwing people over concept in gaming, whether it come from the players or the GM? Because, I mean, I have my own take on it, but before I share it, I'd really like to hear yours first.
So yeah. So here's my thing. If it furthers the story, then I'm 100% okay with it. Now, at the same time, you got to know, again, we've said it probably 15 times now, know your group. But if a story is getting stagnant and people are getting too cocky and everybody's thinking they're invincible, sometimes you got to take them down a peg. And I mean, in the case like kind of you were talking about where, sometimes you can just take an NPC, smoke them, and that does the trick. But in my experience, sometimes you got to take a player out. And yeah, it's something that I want to work into the story. But if it doesn't work that way, I'm not going to be a liar and say I've never just smoked somebody just because, just to do it. Now I'm also going
players out of session.
Yeah, and I'm also going to say this though, where if a character, okay, so if we have a group of characters and we're playing a game, and especially if this is a long-term thing, and people are progressing, getting stronger, if I do take a character out, they're not going to come in at a level 1. They're gonna have some kind of bonus to start, because I want to keep them in the mix and not just get not just be the weakling. But that being said, again, and being very truthful, I have smoked people just to smoke them, just to prove a point and get the story rejuvenized again. And I'll do it again. Sorry, guys who play with me.
Again, knowing your players, I don't have a problem with screwing over a player. Again, because it adds to the story. Even if it's just one of those things, it's like, okay, someone's really relying on a magical item or a specific ability. And it's like, okay, that's great. It works. It doesn't really break anything, but it's like, yeah, I kind of want that player to grow. Then yeah, I'll screw them over. I'll have stuff stolen, stuff broken. I'll throw out a few negative levels in D&D. I've had stolen all kinds of tech from players in Star Wars and other games. I've had players Diablerize someone and then realize it's like, oh, that probably shouldn't have been Diablerized, and so.
So you don't roll a handful of dice and then say, that's not enough to kill the guy. Let's multiply it by this other handful of dice.
Yeah, I mean,
that's why I go with the screen. So I've only got to roll 3 dice. It makes a little bit of noise, and I go, okay, how many hit points do you have? Not enough.
Yeah, I don't. I have never really cared about a lack of transparency. I mean, I've had my good trends, my bad trends as a GM. I've done good things and bad things. Everybody knows that. Anybody that's ever played with me knows that I've been a real mixed bag. And I will admit to having a sick satisfaction of making the entire table laugh when
at the expense of someone else.
Humiliated. And when one springs up out of his chair, starts pointing at me and saying, "F you, Jeff, F you. You effing suck." if done correctly, once again, if done correctly, it could be a very memorable interaction. But if done incorrectly, it could really derail the group as a whole. It could derail the experience. And part of the problem, and a lot of GMs out there know this. If you kill somebody off, sometimes next thing you know, you're going to be dealing with a clone of the exact same character.
Yeah.
So again, to Radis's point, you really got to know that audience.
Yeah, I agree. So I have a question here. So kind of to start closing this thing down. So here's the question. What is your favorite moment? And I mean, you could take a little bit of time to think about it, but what was your favorite moment in all of your RPGs? Now, you could just throw one out there or even a couple, but what was something that really just sticks with you and even to this day, thinking about it brings you joy? Anybody want to jump in on that one?
That's a tough one, Matt, because I've been doing this for 20, 25 years.
Sure.
It's a.
You've been doing it for 30 years, Jeff.
Well, yeah. I mean, it really.
Remember, today, as a matter of fact, today you turn 40-something.
40.
This physical day.
Yes, this physical day. Now, when we post this, it'll be days later. But on this day that we're recording, it is his birthday.
Yep. Happy birthday, Marty.
Thank you.
Steve, Jeff, Bob.
Yeah. Well, okay. I'm going to say two things to your question, Matthew.
Sure.
Though, in all fairness and respect, I mean, the number one memorable thing that will always stick out to me is nerve gassing Ryan's.
Oh yeah, that was a good one.
But the way I described it, you see him punch at the glass trying to get out of the room, and he starts coughing up blood, and you start to see Ryan say, "No." You just don't forget stuff like that. But what I will say is the most favorite thing that I've had throughout my gaming experience is going through the respective generations of players I've had. Because when you and I first started going, Matthew, we were 6th, 7th grade, and then we had another big run mid-high school, Ray. And then I did another big run in early college, and around that time we started, that was around the White Wolf times too.
Yep.
And even now when I still do an occasional session where somebody asks me to do a GM of Dungeons and Dragons or whatever, it's always interesting to see how far the storytelling and the players' reactions have come in every piece of evolution. It's evolution that I enjoy from the players, but that's where I come out.
Yeah, and that'll be for another podcast. Honestly, I would love to revisit this part as far as the game's concerned, and then talk about the different generations and their styles, because at this point, man, 6, 7 generations. I mean, like there's Gen 1, which it's the 3 of us and 2 others, and then Gen 2 is the kids, and then there's a Gen 3 where it's like we start funneling in. I mean, it's partly the kids, but it's partly new people and those kinds of things. But yeah, that'll be another podcast for another day. But
better write that down.
Yeah, well, I already did, so it's awesome.
Well, just to see a blood vein pop there. Speaking of those gens, just a quick question on that: was Tracker Gen 1 or 2?
He is technically, gosh,
I think he's more 2.
He's like the beginning of 2.
Okay, that's what I thought. But,
yeah.
So.
Well, because I'm talking about like Gen 1 is Scott. Scott's in there, and
right?
Then,
yeah, I knew that.
And then why am I drawing a blank? It's oh man, no, Mary wasn't Gen 1, was she?
No, you three, Scott, and Ray were the Gen 1 players.
Yeah, you're right. You're right.
I didn't take on that many players back then.
Yeah, and anyways, but kind of to get back to the favorite moments thing. there's I've got 2. I mean, I've got a bunch. We've been doing this a long time, so there's a lot of fun times. But one of them was the trial of Tracker. that was so much fun, and I'm trying to remember exactly how it went down. But it was do you think we should? what was it? Do you think we should kill him or whatever? And you're like, yes.
Does this character deserve to die?
Oh, yeah, does this character deserve to die? And it was like some random, bad guy that's like, yes. And everybody was like, oh, we didn't think this was going to go down this way. And then the other favorite time or other favorite event, whatever that we had, it was the summer of our 7th grade, or so between 7th and 8th grade, I believe, where like we were so into the game that we would play sessions somehow without the GM, and we would just make up stories and have adventures and whatever. And then we'd come back and be like, hey, by the way, we did this. And you'd be like, all right, I'll allow it, But
yeah, I remember you and Scott did that a few times.
yeah, but it was when the first time that we experienced the player actually going bad. And so it wasn't just all of us versus the bad. It was some of us versus some of us, and how that all played out, which unfortunately we had to take care of one of the story arcs with somebody basically off camera because he kind of vanished from the scene for the summer. That being Scott. But yeah, that was an excellent storyline. I mean, that was probably some of your best work that you ever did. And it was, I mean, to this day, I remember all the battles and the frustrations where, sometimes we'd win, sometimes we'd lose as far as the battles go, but like it just kept going and going. And we're like, it became desperate. Like we were like, we have to get, because I mean, it's when the game became kind of mystical. And we're like, we've got to get the elemental shards. And it's based Final Fantasy stuff, fine. But we're like, we've got to get the elemental shards and we've got to get this weapon because if we don't, the whole world's going to die. And we're like fighting with each other and people are stealing them from each other. And man, that was that was a good time. That was a really
We'll talk
good time.
about inspirations another day.
Sure.
Because it's been, over 30 years, there's a lot of inspirations that have been littered in.
Oh, yeah.
Woven in there. But what about you, Ray?
I didn't say that out loud, did I?
What about you, Ray? What was some of your favorites?
Going back to that same White Wolf game that lasted forever. So as a Marauder, my thing was I saw Native Americans everywhere. Backstory, lost in the Lewis and Clark times in the wilderness from an English family, blah, blah, blah. My first experience with magic, I ended up wiping out the Native Americans that saved me as a child. So when I flipped and went crazy, my character saw Native Americans. Couldn't interact with them or anything, but just like walking down the street and all of a sudden, for some reason, there's a Native American staying there. About 6 months into the game, another buddy started playing, and he played 2 sessions before I showed up work-wise to get to play, something that was out. But started playing, and the GM slides me a note letting me know that his character is a Native American. My character's, 200 years old and has learned that when I see a Native American, probably not really there. So I choose to ignore most of the Native Americans that I see. So we spent 3 weeks playing those every night with him. I never said anything to him. No one else in the group knew what what the flaw was, except for the GM. The GM never told him. All he told me was that, and I'd never told him. So it was like 3 months, and just like outside of the game, he was like, "Did your character hate mine?" I was like, "No, I'm just role playing my character. There's nothing against your character. When we get in game, stuff would happen. I would just completely ignore everything he's doing." And then finally got to tell him, and he laughed. And he's like, "Dude, that is so funny." For the last 3 months, I didn't know what was going on. And I was like, my character was, I didn't know how to act half the time. And I was like, I know, I could tell because your character would start asking other players to ask me something because you knew I wouldn't answer. So
awesome.
It was just funny just watching another player interacting with my character, not knowing why my character wasn't interacting with him. And then, like I said, we got to keep that up for about 3 months of just natural, real reactions and his character being, pushed into this direction of, I don't know why he doesn't ever talk to me. I don't know, it just stuck out to me. There's a lot from that whole session, that series that stuck out with me, but I think that was the funniest. Of course, if you guys knew the people, it'd be even funnier because the guy who was playing it also was like, I am in real life full-blooded Native American, and he wasn't. So he was playing the Native American in the game. It's like, that's funny.
Nice.
So, yeah.
That's pretty awesome.
Yep.
So anything else we want to cover before we start wrapping up here?
Nothing that I can't cover at a later time.
All right, cool. So
no, I think this is a good one. We've been right at an hour, aren't we? Yeah, we're a little bit over, but not.
Yeah, it's okay. Here's how we're gonna close this out. So obviously, it's the middle of, or it's getting towards the end of May. The country / world, has been experiencing quite a few negative things, whether it's the loss of your job, potentially being ill from what's going on, being worried about loved ones, and just the stresses that go along with that. So, I kind of wanted to close a little bit on a positive note, if possible, and trying my best anyways to support businesses and things that, I would imagine are being affected quite a bit, with what's going on, with stores being closed and small businesses and stuff. So the first thing I'm going to say is if you've got a local comic shop or gaming shop or something like that, and you're lucky enough that you've been working through this and or getting paid and or whatever, as soon as we open up and there's a possibilities, go out to those shops, man, and buy something. Buy something, because they need it. A lot of those shops, they survive month to month, and they're surviving because they love it, and they're providing us, those places to go to get that stuff. So, for the local area specifically, I'm just going to throw out Top Cut. As far as the comics, they sell comics, board games, all that kind of stuff. So, make sure that when things open up, and hopefully it's starts opening up here in the next week or so, make sure you go out there and just, buy something, even if it's just a comic book, because those guys have probably been chomping at the bit to get that place back open. And, realistically, I don't know what the total effects are going to be on this. So again, support your local comic shops. And I definitely say for us, here in Rockford, Illinois, support Top Cut, either store, doesn't matter. Get them. So anybody else want to throw something out there?
Nah, you hit the nail right on the head, man. I feel the same way about it. There's a lot of people out there that are doing a lot of good things, and it's hard to say where everybody's going to land at once the smoke's cleared. I know a lot of people that are doing a lot of interesting projects, and they do a lot of interesting work on the side. More to come with that. That's what I'll say for now. More to come.
Yeah.
But I want to kind of see where things what shakes out of the trees in the coming weeks.
Okay. What about you, Radis?
Yeah. No, I agree. Definitely support your local shops. Even outside of this, if you're getting into gaming or looking into gaming, most of those shops, those people that are working there are not working there for a job. Most of them are working there because they love gaming of some sort. And, hey, they just happen to find a place to pay them to do that. So, go there now to help keep them open, keep those stores open. So, but at the same time, it's a great atmosphere. Even if you just go in and talk to the clerk that's working there, it's hey, what do people buy? Whether it's a board game, it's a card game. I know the ones here in the St. Louis area, Fantasy Shop, most of them have game days. So the shops aren't very large, but you can go in there on a Saturday, and there could be 2 or 3 tables set up with board games, and there'll be a sign-up sheet for, D&D on every third Friday, whatever they do up there. I haven't been in there for a while and looking at their sign-up sheets because I've got home games. And just talk to them. They'll make good recommendations, and like I said, most of them won't steer you wrong. Obviously, everyone's got their opinions, so their opinions may not be exactly, they may not be the same thing you are into. But for the most part, if you tell them, hey, I really like such and such, they're going to point you in the right direction. And most of them are pretty easy to talk to, so they're gamers just like we are. So.
Yep. Actually, I'm going to throw one more out there. It just clicked in my mind. It's something that I discovered recently, but also I know Radis has been there. I don't know if you've been there, Jeff, but that's Cataclysm Games. Yeah, that one's. It's a legit gaming and miniature shop, and very friendly people. And I know that they, from what I've read on their Facebook page and that kind of stuff, is they didn't ever close. They were doing some orders and stuff. So. But they also did some things with their employees where they were really trying to support them through this as well, even though the workloads were low and everything else. So definitely support them as well. And just support your local shops. It doesn't even have to be a comic shop. Go buy a burrito somewhere, at a local place, support local. The franchises will more than likely keep their jobs. Okay. And I'm not saying that we shouldn't support them too, but like get the local brick and mortars, take care of them. If you take care of them, they take care of you. We take care of our community and start local, wherever you are, whether it's Rockford, St. Louis area, wherever, just take care of your local area first. So in that closing, I'd like to thank you guys again. So, Mad Marty, he's got a YouTube channel. Go ahead and plug that.
Yeah, Bad Respect TV. We're still, unfortunately, with the whole virus situation, my original plan has derailed. But we are doing some occasional reviews and some additional skits, that sort of thing. But I'll probably know more about where I'm going with that probably within the next 2 months. But we'll just start there.
And then, Radis, you got any plugs that you want to throw out there?
Man, I do squat but work.
That's okay. I hear you.
I'm hoping to put more work into this channel though and help out. So
all right, cool. And then so a couple of final plugs. Our good friend Raven J, he has a podcast, Retro. You can get that on.
Check it out. It's good.
Check it out. It's pretty legit. I mean, it is what it is. It's retro topics, and they have some really good conversations on that. Also, check out After We Take Out the Garbage. That's another local one. They have some pretty, it's just basically a husband and wife couple. Sometimes they have a guest on there, and they just talk about the week. And to me, it's pretty entertaining. Maybe not for you, but God bless you one way or another. And then Saturday Night Freak Show. They basically review a movie pretty much every week, and sometimes it's like a black and white. Sometimes it is something more obscure. Sometimes they did a whole series on Scream once which that's pop culture right there. So if you get a chance, listen to that as well. It's a guy named Colin. He's technically my cousin by marriage, but he's a really good dude. So yeah, go ahead and listen to those. And that's to you, Mad Marty, and to you, Radis, thanks for joining me, and y'all take care. We'll see you next time.
Take care. Cool. Peace.
If you want my body and you think I'm sexy, come on, baby, let me know.